Here I am again. Hi. So much has gone on, right? Like what? We gotta give a round of applause to Zion Don, right? We got to. Standing ovation, round of applause for Zion Don, because it's like his scheming is so wicked. His duplicity is so pronounced, enhanced, loud, extreme, extravagant, that it's like, man, you are single-handedly like putting a torch to the veil that was casted over the eyes of those who remain asleep in relation to, the parasite that be and its crimes against humanity. It just is truly interesting to see. Like, I really feel like that meme with like Michael Jackson just sitting there eating my popcorn, like, I fucking knew this shit would all unfold. I remember when I was like, that one fine day, I think it was like in 2019 or 2020. I think it was 2019 where I felt so emboldened with the truth in relation to World War II and the Noble Wolf that I made a post that I was met with intense criticism, overall rejection from the whole. I've lost like all of my friends. There was a social suicide that I certainly experienced when I stepped over the line of comfortability in terms of sharing intel. And so I find myself in this like peculiar position that I always intuited would come, right? With my friends that are like, girl, you're crazy. Like, why would you share that? That's like insane. You know what I mean? Like, even if like this is true, like, why would you ever? And it's like, because I live and breathe for the truth. Because my entire quest in matter is to uncover the truth. Because from the moment that I incarnated, I knew this was all bullshit. That's why. So whenever I was like implanted with the truth, whenever I was like activated with that ultimate blood memory of like, there was no stopping what was like pouring out of me. You know what I mean? It was demanding to be shared at any and all costs. While everyone else was posting a black square, I was hailing 88. You know what I mean? And that was just, people were like, what? Like in the height of racial tensions, they're like, what are you doing? And it's just like, I literally said, there will come a day where y'all will see indefinitely that everything that I have shared, crazy as it may seem, is the ultimate truth. And so yeah, like here we are in this critical timeline, in this moment of immense quickening where anything can happen because everything has happened, right? Where what was once so insane to even consider to bring up in conversation is now it's just commonplace because it's so obvious. Despite this greater awakening, as amazing as it is, there still is this cognitive dissonance that kind of sits like a callus over the collective psyche, right? Because people can only go so far, right? Because the programming runs so deep. People who are just beginning to wake up to this are still tethered psychologically to the hypnotism, to the deception that has been wired in their brain chemistry from like the moment that they were born, right? And so this is natural. I think this is just a part of awakening. Like cognitive dissonance is a part of awakening due to the fact that like we are living in a dark cycle. We are living in the Kali Yuga. And so we're going through this alchemy. We're going through this awakening, and it happens gradually. It happens in stages. And so again, I think that this is just a natural result of that process. This cognitive dissonance where you hold two thoughts that are conflicting, in the same brain, right? In the same psyche. And so what I'm speaking to is the fact that people can fully grasp, and you see people talk all the time about like, wow, the crimes of the IDF and oh my God, their wicked strategies, and how they will say that the Palestinians are guilty for what they are actually guilty of just to garner the support of the collective.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of beheaded Palestinian babies and children, Palestinian children with severed limbs, killed by Israel. And not a single corporate media outlet has reported on how Israel has systematically beheaded Palestinian children on a daily basis for the last 15 months. And yet every single one of these Western media outlets was so quick to spread the mass atrocity propaganda in order to manufacture consent for Israel's genocide by repeating a story about an incident which never took place.
Right? It's always the same strategy with this evil. The playbook is as old as dust. They just apply the same strategy to a new phase of war. They create these narratives that are so abhorrent because they need to dehumanize their nemesis in order to, like I said, gain the support of people who otherwise would never support something so wicked. And again, this is something that is not new, but that's what bothers me, is that people will be so aware of that, right? Like, be so aware of that strategy. Like, speak on it, report on it, observe it with absolute like clarity and awareness, whilst also still believing in the like victor side of World War II, which is the wicked side of World War II. You know, I guess you can say that amnesia is the reason for the evil, because the absence of memory is the reason that we have descended into this system of slavery. The man who has no sense of history is like a man who has no ears or eyes. This pearl of wisdom emphasizes the importance of understanding the past to comprehend the present, to then secure a direction for a better future. Don't you see the parallels from the past that coincide with the present? It's one great war that we forget because of propagandized fugue. And yet still, as sound as the truth exists, this warning echoes out from the rubble of our forbidden past, from the mind of a hero who has been forgotten, as we now live in times that have been shaped by the collective amnesia that rejects the truth of history. But only within that truth do we have the power to shape destiny. At what point will we awaken from the travesty with the ability to recognize good from evil? At what point will we recognize what has been stolen from our people? Here now we bear witness to reiterations from the past, and still the masses continue to demonize a hero that fought with an iron will to combat such abhorrent war crimes played out by demiurgic machine men. If college kids can recognize Yahya Sinwar as a hero in closer proximity to war crime atrocities, what is it that prevents them from recognizing the same in Adolf Hitler? The only thing that separates them is decades of propaganda. So, how much of it until the collective forgets again, falling under the hypnotism that says good is evil and evil is good, slandering our heroes whilst exalting the enemy within their artificial cybernetic dystopian reality? What is happening right now on the grand stage of the world is nothing new. It's a repetition due to the fact that we are a species who have been wiped of our memory, wiped of true history, and therefore we were put in the critical situation where we were bound to repeat it. And so here we are, living in the repetition of the past due to the fact that we forgot. You know what I mean? And so that's why I create this video in an attempt to say, like, draw that connection. Draw that connection from World War II to what I see to be World War III, right? It is the same story. It is the same battle. It is the same war. It's just a different phase. They use the same tactics, the same strategies. And until we are able to see it in its totality, we will continue to be a species that is capable of slavery. And that's how they look at you, right? They look at us like the Goyim, that we are just their cattle. That's why, like, what they're doing is so blatant at this point, because they truly don't care. They literally don't care how condescending, how much the gaslighting is just bold-faced, obvious. They don't care because they think you're stupid, right? Because they've rendered you useless with their programming that has completely wiped your memory, that has completely detached you from the wisdom of true history, which is the truth of true history. And like I said, if we continue to if we continue to only lean into aspects of the truth whilst rejecting other aspects of the truth, like the truth is holism. The truth is a whole truth. It's not partial. It's not remnants. It's not residual. So we need to draw it all in. And now, alas, I think it's finally safe to say, right? We all, in the air of absolute absurdity, in the air of absolute wickedness, in the air of this gaslighting duplicity that we're experiencing from politicians from both sides, in the air of recognizing that we are literally hostages of a foreign state, right? In the air of recognizing that we have been invaded, in the air of recognizing that we exist under a reign of treason, right? All of this, we can come so far. If we could be so close, if we could observe at last the evil that has been behind the curtains, can't we then too recognize that these strategies, that these methods of war in an objective of subjugation have been used many times over? Don't we owe some people in history an apology? Don't we? I mean, don't we? Don't we really collectively? Because we have been condemning benevolence whilst feeding evil due to amnesia, due to our lack of knowing true history. Therefore, being victims of a collective who were bound to repeat it since it's worked before. And we can see that it's worked before as we are the result of it working before. How much anti-Palestinian propaganda? How much political intimidation? How much you can't say that on a college campus, or you can't go to this school, you will be expelled? How much, if you say this, we will imprison you? How much, if you say this, you will lose your social media platforms? Until we believe the lie again and fall into another round of amnesia, where in the future we just repeat the chaos of yesteryear and today. Right? Like, we have to understand the past to grasp the reality of the present to secure a better future. And the only way we can do that is if we recognize that we are victims of this repetition due to the amnesia of the collective. Because that's the thing, y'all. Like, they've done it before. During World War II, they put out anti-Aryan propaganda that completely saturated the entire world. Because as many pro-Palestinians know at this stage in the game, that's their method. That's their strategy. Dehumanize their nemesis to justify their crimes against the innocent. It's a playbook as old as time. They have been using these methods of war. They have been using these psychological strategies since Genesis, since biblical times. It is a prototype that repeats through the times. And again, until we understand true history, we are bound to repeat the tragedies of the past. We are just going to continue out this. That's what karma is. You know what I mean? Like, you got to clear karma in order to transcend. And so that's the stage that that's the junction, right? We find ourselves in a timeline where it's like, we got to grasp this. Adolf once said that anyone who thinks of National Socialism as a mere political movement knows nothing about it at all. This was to impart the truth that beyond the exoteric war of what most people perceive, there exists a parallel spiritual war alongside what is perceptible to the eye. It is my knowing that Maestro Miguel Serrano would dedicate his life to the elaboration of that truth with his impeccable work. At the root, this all begins with a prototype, always. The genius of Hitler was that he was capable of perceiving good from evil, a capability scarce to this age as it's rooted in a mastery of the soul that is foreign to this world. The great calamity of the psyche began long ago in the paradisal garden of good and evil. Judeo-Christianity tells us that the divine couple were expelled from paradise due to the sin of the woman, who in truth is not Eve, but rather Lilith, the eternal feminine, who is orphically linked to the eternal masculine, an angel named Lucifer, not the man, Adam. These were the so-called pre-Adamites that are actually Venusian and progenitors of the biblical Nephilim, that are endlessly demonized by the greater collective that has been wired to rage against wisdom embodied. As you shall begin to see, the fallen angel lineage are the exiles of this demiurgic world governed by the imposter god, and we here now exist within the echoes of their spiritual imprint, an iteration of a prototype that began long ago. The story of the noble wolf is a testament to this truth, a divinity in matter whose light was so immense, it shook the core of a reality occupied by the dark forces of the Kali Yuga. And so the story really goes. Lilith accepted the apple from the serpentine dragon that offered her the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, which contained the gnosis of Kundalini, the fruit that she would then impart to her beloved through an initiation that would alchemize a hero. This primeval mythos is an archive of extraterrestrial history that would go on to be repurposed by the Wicked One as a punishable act that led to the paradisal exile of Adam and Eve. This is a mythos that inspired the story of Adam and Eve that has been repurposed for Jewish worship. In actuality, our exile from paradise began with the original sin, where the gods mixed with the daughters of men, risking our immortality with the mixing and pollution of our divine astral blood. Strange, is it not, that nobody ever really asked why there was such a sin in seeking and attaining the apple that contained the knowledge of good and evil? Perhaps maybe because a jealous messianic imposter god cannot possibly rule a reality inhabited by those who can see with absolute clarity the distinction between the diametric forces of good and evil. If you really think about it, this disability is at the root of all evil, as without the higher faculties of discernment, especially in relation to our ability to discern from good and evil, we permit disorder and imbalance to exist where evil reigns over good within the absence of the knowledge of good and evil. The result is the horror of the Kali Yuga. The demiurgic outlash against the pure of heart who can see God because they withhold the gnosis of good and evil repeats within the graveyards of Gaia. Here, where higher vision is cursed by the rage of inferior forces. Because of this spiritual deficiency, few really understand the science of spiritual energetics because its wisdom has been forbidden since time immemorial. Hyperborean alchemy and magic has been forbidden by an entity that has occupied the world with its anti-magic, anti-gnosis laws and policies. This world is the result of a reality suffocated from the lack of wisdom. Abrahamic religions are designed for worship to a sketchy entity that demands blind obedience, commanding its adepts to keep their heads to the ground, dismiss the wisdom of the stars, and detach from the living life force of the natural world, commanding ignorance whilst promising salvation from the torture of existence in a magicless world of his own design. The fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil withholds the gnosis of Kundalini alchemy, an alchemy that creates gods and goddesses, divyas who can discern light from dark. In other terms, light bearers who maintain the balance and law of a paradisal earth free from spiritual manipulation and parasitic control. Here on the second earth, where many foolishly hate the people who are being oppressed whilst loving the people who are doing the oppressing, do so within the iteration of this mythological prototype. Where wisdom is made a sin with speech laws and silencing, we mirror the myth of Lucifer and Lilith. Just as all past heroes of our lineage who boldly cast light and magic in a world of deceit, those who recognize that the true sin derives from the lack of higher intelligence. And so it is. We exist within a realm of hollow men with no ears and no eyes, who repeat history because they subconsciously believe that light and truth is a sin. The repetition ends when we accept the fruit that has been forbidden.